funeral directors have been proudly serving the people of this community since 1918. Service is our motto. The poor, the rich, the middle class, and all are given the best of care and attention at all times. You have the privilege to select what you want. In your time of need, contact the capable, the competent, and the dependable staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, who is genuinely concerned with your care. At J.W. Williams Funeral Home, you are aptly served by the proprietor president, Deacon Arthur L. Parker, who continues the traditions and values set forth by the past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams. Your announcers for the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Sunday morning program are Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, Minister Frankie Harmon, Miss Sandra Johnson, and Deacon Earl Clark, Jr.
Thank you, and good morning, friends. We come to you this morning to bring announcements, dedications, and songs. We certainly hope that your day may be brighter after listening to our program. The family of Miss Vivian Diane Hunt of Cordele, Georgia. The family of United States Navy veteran Mr. Romana Robertson of Decatur, Georgia. The family of Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson, Sr. of DeSoto, Georgia. The family of Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan, Jr. of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. William Clark of Araby, Georgia. The family of Deacon Charlie B. Doster of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Ezel Kendrick, Jr. of Cordele, Georgia. Would like to thank their many friends for the food, the flowers, the condolences, and all other expressions of sympathy and kindness shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. Miss Vivian Diane Hunt, age 59, of 1810 Richardson Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Sunday, January 30th, at Atrium Health, Navison in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Vivian Diane Hunt was held Sunday, February 6th, at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. Dr. Frankie Harmon, pastor of the New St. Stephen's Non-Denominational Church, officiated. The burial followed at Westview Memorial Gardens in Ashburn, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Miss Rotunda Harmon, Miss Molisha Harmon, all of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Akeisha Hunt of Atlanta, Georgia, Miss Centoria Hunt, Mr. Quinton Hunt, and Mr. Eric Hunt, all of Cordele, Georgia, Mrs. Mataria Westbrook and her husband, Mr. Broderick Westbrook of Atlanta, Georgia, 19 beloved grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren, her loving and devoted sisters, Miss Clementine Hunt of Cordele, Georgia, and Miss Mary E. Hunt of Ashburn, Georgia. Her beloved brothers, Mr. Nathaniel Hunt and his wife, Mrs. Lois Hunt of Lake Wales, Florida, Mr. Lee Vester Hunt and his wife, Mrs. Deborah Hunt, and Mr. Larry Hunt of Cordele, Georgia. 14 beloved aunts, 14 uncles, a host of nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and a multitude of devoted friends survive Miss Vivian Diane Hunt, age 59, of 1810 Richardson Street, Cordele, Georgia. United States Navy veteran, Mr. Romana Robertson, age 67, of 1923, Whitehall Forest Court, Decatur, Georgia, died Sunday, January 30th, at his residence in Decatur, Georgia. The funeral service with military honors for Mr. Romana Robertson, age 67, was held Sunday, February 6th, at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, officiated. The burial followed at the Vienna City Cemetery in Vienna, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted mother, Mrs. Betty Robertson of Cordele, Georgia. 3 beloved children, Mr. Joseph Richard Robertson of Orlando, Florida, Mrs. Adrena Beverly Robertson of Hinesville, Georgia, and Miss Tiara Jones of Fairburn, Georgia. 1 great-granddaughter, 2 beloved brothers, Mr. Mulford Robertson Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Valerie Robertson of Vienna, Georgia, and Mr. Ricky Robertson and his wife, Mrs. Melba Robertson of Lithonia, Georgia. 2 beloved aunts, Mrs. Laurie Hook of Detroit, Michigan, and Mrs. Annie Robertson of St. Petersburg, Florida. 2 beloved uncles, Mr. Jerry Robertson of St. Petersburg, Florida, and Mr. Ulysses Marshall and his wife, Mrs. Brenda Marshall of Bowie, Maryland. A host of beloved nieces and nephews, cousins, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. United States Navy veteran, Mr. Romana Robertson, age 67, of 1923, Whitehall Forest Court, Decatur, Georgia. Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson, Sr., age 83, of 722 Stiles Robinson Road, DeSoto, Georgia, died Wednesday, February 2nd, at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson Sr., age 83, was held Wednesday, February 9th, on the grounds of his beloved New Beulah Baptist Church in Cobb, Georgia. The Reverend Lorenzo Hurd officiated. The eulogy was delivered by his pastor, the Reverend Christopher Perry. The burial followed at the Sue Walker Cemetery in Cobb, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife of 58 years, Mother Mamie Sneed Robinson of DeSoto, Georgia. His beloved and devoted children, Mrs. Rosemary Jones and her husband, Deacon Kelvin Jones of Leslie, Georgia. Mrs. Barbara Ann McDonald and her husband, Mr. Donnell McDonald of Charleston, South Carolina. Retired Army First Sergeant Arthur Lee Robinson Jr. and his wife, retired Army Sergeant First Class Sonia Robinson Jr. Robinson. Retired Air Force Senior Master Sergeant Anthony Robinson and his wife, retired Air Force Senior Master Sergeant Kimberly Robinson, both of Bon Air, Georgia. Mr. Christopher Robinson and his wife, Mrs. Cassandra Robinson of McDonald, Georgia. Dr. Brooks Robinson of Lake Blackshear, Georgia. A beloved granddaughter raised as his own, Miss Brittany Blackman of Leesburg, Georgia. 10 loving and devoted grandchildren, his beloved great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. His beloved and devoted sibling, Mr. Jeff Robinson Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Mary Ann Robinson of Orlando, Florida. Mr. Clifford Robinson of Marietta, Georgia. Mr. Tommy Robinson Sr. of Tampa, Florida. And Mr. Jesse Robinson and his wife, Mrs. Rosa Robinson of Valdosta, Georgia. His beloved stepsister, Miss Carol Didell of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved sisters-in-law, Mrs. Barbara Robinson of Albany, Georgia. Dr. Eutha Didell of Locust Grove, Georgia. Mrs. Carrie Sneed of Atlanta, Georgia. Mrs. Nancy Sneed Clark of Leslie, Georgia. And Mrs. Martha Sneed of Americus, Georgia. His beloved brothers-in-law, Mr. Ernest Sneed of Atlanta, Georgia, and Mr. Willie C. Sneed of Rathcliffe, Kentucky. His beloved uncles, Mr. Charlie C. Sneed of DeSoto, Georgia, and Mr. Robert Sneed of Hartwell, Georgia. A beloved aunt, Miss Mildred Sneed of Leslie, Georgia, and his beloved New Beulah Baptist Church family, and a host of devoted nieces, nephews, cousins, friends, and family, including Mrs. Elizabeth Waters, Mrs. Alpine Sweet, Miss Sarah Robinson, Ms. Ola Robinson, and his devoted nephew, Mr. Tyrone Sneed, all survive. Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson Sr., age 83, of 722 Style Robinson Road, DeSoto, Georgia. Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan, Jr., age 61, of 1424 Everett Court, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, February 1st, at the Phoebe Putnam Memorial Hospital North Campus in Albany, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan, Jr., age 61, was held Saturday, February 12th, at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, officiated. The burial followed at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Vernetta Regina Morgan of Cordele, Georgia, his loving and caring children, Mrs. Decuria Cutts Perry, and her husband, Minister Courtney Perry of Hampton, Georgia, Miss Andrea Barthel of Cordele, Georgia, and Mr. Julian Glenn Sr. of Warner Robins, Georgia. 13 beloved grandchildren, his loving and devoted sisters, Miss Johnny Morgan, Mrs. Cora Lofton, and her husband, Mr. Wayne Lofton of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Sonia Thornton of Warner Robins, Georgia, and Mrs. Janice Morgan Smith of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved brothers, Deacon Michael Morgan and his wife, Mrs. Kamisha Morgan, Mr. Anthony Morgan, and Mr. Anthony Harris, all of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved aunts and uncles, Mrs. Patricia Robinson and her husband, Mr. Kelvin Robinson, Minister Gardner Morgan and his wife, Mrs. Beulah Morgan, Mr. Eddie Morgan and his wife, Mrs. Jeanette Morgan, all of Cordele, Georgia, Mrs. Omi J. Blunt and her husband, Mr. Joseph Blunt of West Chapel, Florida, Mrs. Emma Collier and her husband, Mr. Charles Collier, and Mrs. Tommy Presley, all of Cordele, Georgia, and Mrs. Omi Lee Ford of Vienna, Georgia, his beloved in-law, Miss Cynthia Bryant of Tucker, Georgia, Mrs. Judy Faye Williams and her husband, Mr. Clarence Williams of Konya, Georgia, Mrs. Patricia Sutton and her husband, Mr. Percy Sutton of Kathleen, Texas, Mrs. Jackie Smith of Cordele, Georgia, the Reverend Leonard Boston and his wife, Mrs. Lucille Boston, and Mr. Terry Boston, both of Vienna, Georgia, a host of beloved nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan Jr., age 61, of 1424 Ebert Court, Cordele, Georgia. Mr. William Clark, better known as Pee Wee, age 57, of 4324 Industrial Boulevard, Arabi, Georgia, died Thursday, February 3rd at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. William Clark, better known as Pee Wee, was held Saturday, February 12th at the Little Rock Baptist Church Cemetery in Arabi, Georgia. The Reverend Joseph Atkins, pastor of the Friendship Baptist Church, officiated. Survivors include his loving companion, Miss Phyllis West, and her children, his stepchildren, Mr. Freddie Jones, Mr. Frazier Jones, Mr. John Jones, and Mr. Theo Smith, all of Ashburn, Georgia. 2 grandchildren, his loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Beulah May Watkins and her husband, Mr. Bill Watkins of Tampa, Florida, Mrs. Helen Rogers and her husband, Deacon Jesse Rogers of Cordele, Georgia, Mrs. Johnny Ann Briggs and her husband, Mr. Isaac Briggs Jr. of Somerset, New Jersey, and Miss Tina Garrett and her husband, Mr. Henry Garrett of Raleigh, North Carolina. His beloved brothers, Mr. Willie B. Clark and his wife, Mrs. Cynthia Clark of Arabi, Georgia, Mr. Jerome Clark and Mr. Emmett Clark, both of Cordele, Georgia. A host of devoted nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. William Clark, better known as Pee Wee, age 57, of 4324 Industrial Boulevard, Arabi, Georgia. Deacon Charlie B. Doster, age 81, of 201 West 27th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Monday, February 7th at his residence in Cordele, Georgia. The memorial service for Deacon Charlie B. Doster, age 81, was held Saturday, February 12th at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owen, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, officiated. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Joanne Hicks Doster of Cordele, Georgia, his loving and devoted children, Mrs. Gwendolyn Doster Waters, Miss Teresa Doster, Mrs. Linda Doster Maddox, Miss Joyce A. Doster, Mr. Charles Doster Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Christine Doster, and Ms. Latoya Pratt, all of Cordele, Georgia, Ms. Sabrina Gregory of San Antonio, Texas, and Mr. Royce Stubbins and his wife, Mrs. Carletta Stubbins of Woodbridge, Virginia. His beloved grandchildren, his loving and caring sisters, Miss Frankie Doster of Albany, Georgia, Mrs. Agnes Stubbs and her husband, Mr. Eddie Stubbs of Stockbridge, Georgia, and Miss Lena Mae Bly of Tampa, Florida. His beloved aunts and uncles, Mrs. Eloise Butts of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Elizabeth Polk of Ambrose, Georgia, Mr. Wallace Colquitt of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Mr. William Colquitt and his wife, Mrs. Georgia Colquitt of Sanford, Florida, and Mr. James Colquitt of Hines City, Florida. 7 beloved sisters-in-law, 6 brothers-in-law, a host of nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends, to include Mrs. Gradine Greenford of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Jim and Mrs. Brenda Cooper of Albany, Georgia, Deacon Joe and Mrs. Rosemary Brown, Miss Easter May Sanders, Miss Ella Ree Hoover, Deacon Jesse and Mrs. Angela Walker, and Miss Shirley Powers, all of Cordele, Georgia, the Reverend James and Mrs. Daisy Wedges of Warwick, Georgia, all survived. Deacon Charlie B. Doster, age 81, of 201 West 27th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Ezel Kendrick Jr., age 82, of 1101 County Line Road, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, February 8th, at his residence in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Eva J. Kendrick of Cordele, Georgia, his loving and devoted children, Mr. Ezel Kendrick III and Mrs. Angela Warren, and her husband, Mr. Richard Warren, both of Orlando, Florida. Mr. Richard Kendrick of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Kenneth Kendrick of Sarasota, Florida, and Mr. Gregory Kendrick of Cordele, Georgia. 13 beloved grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, a beloved aunt, Mrs. Alice Walker of Orlando, Florida, his beloved in-law, Mrs. Janie Beverly, and her husband, Mr. Forrest Beverly of Houston, Texas, Miss Brenda Rawls of Tallahassee, Florida, Mr. John Rawls and his wife, Mrs. Patricia Rawls of Blakely, Georgia, and Mr. Chris Rawls and his wife, Mrs. Cheryl Rawls of Florida. A host of devoted nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Ezel Kendrick Jr., age 82, of 1101 County Line Road, Cordele, Georgia. Again, the family of Miss Vivian Diane Hunt of Cordele, Georgia, the family of United States Navy veteran Mr. Romano Roberson of Decatur, Georgia, the family of Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson, Sr. of DeSoto, Georgia, the family of Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan, Jr. of Cordele, Georgia, the family of Mr. William Clark of Araby, Georgia, the family of Deacon Charlie B. Doster of Cordele, Georgia, the family of Mr. Ezel Kendrick Jr. of Cordele, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for all of the many kindnesses shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. May God bless each of you is their prayer. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors, serving Cordele and Diana, were in charge of each of these arrangements during the past week. And now, it is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcement. Mr. Vernon David Conaway, age 54, of Macon, Georgia, died Sunday, February 6th at Atrium Health Navison in Macon, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife of 15 years, Elder Matrit M. Conaway of Macon, Georgia, his caring son, Mr. J. Daniel Gaston II of Milford, Georgia, and Mr. Aston M.G. Conaway of Lithonia, Georgia, a beloved daughter, Miss Christina M. Conaway of Lithonia, Georgia, his beloved goddaughters, Miss Mona Randolph of Hampton, Georgia, Miss Neville Johnson of Bristol, Pennsylvania, his beloved mother, Mrs. Shirley A. Conaway of Harrington, Georgia, his beloved in-law, Bishop Willie Hunter and Pastor Gail P. Hunter of Byram, Georgia, his beloved brothers, Mr. Russell T. Conaway of Norfolk, Virginia, and Mr. W. K. Hunter III and his wife, Mrs. Jewel Hunter of Libron, Georgia, his beloved sisters, Miss Adrian Conaway of Stone Mountain, Georgia, and Miss Amanda G. Hunter of Logansville, Georgia, his beloved aunts and uncle, Mrs. Linda Perry and her husband, Sir Lawrence Perry of Chesapeake, Virginia, Miss Pamela Taylor, Miss Bertha Taylor, Miss Sabrina Taylor, and Mrs. Gail Reed and her husband, Mr. Linwood Reed, all of Millsboro, Delaware. Elder Elizabeth Johnson of Bristol, Pennsylvania, Mrs. Linda Moat and her husband, Mr. Calvin Moat of Brandon, Mississippi, Miss Ruby Barnes of Jackson, Mississippi, Mrs. Edna Williams and her husband, Mr. Dennis Williams of Cleveland, Ohio, Mr. Sonny Russ of Indiana, Mr. Bruce Taylor of Georgetown, Delaware, Mr. Elijah Hunter of Fort Walton, Florida, and Mr. Abraham Hunter and his wife, Mrs. Barbara Hunter of Douglasville, Georgia, his beloved nieces and nephew, a host of loving cousins, friends, church family, along with his dear friend and mentor, Elder Victor Morgan, and his wife, Mrs. Carolyn Morgan of Bear, Delaware, all survived. Mr. Vernon David Conaway, age 54, of Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Vernon Davis Conaway, age 54, will be held Friday, February 18 at 12 noon on the grounds of New Mercy, New Beginnings, New Victory Ministries in Macon, Georgia. His beloved father-in-law, Bishop Willie Hunter, will officiate. Mr. Francis Singleton, better known as Mike, age 76, of 179 Henry Road, Warwick, Georgia, died Monday, February 7th at the Phoebe Putnam Memorial Hospital, North Campus in Albany, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Gertrude Singleton of Warwick, Georgia, his loving and devoted children, Mrs. Tracy Peterson and her husband, Mr. Greg Peterson of Vienna, Georgia, Miss Cecilia Singleton and her husband, Mr. Abrick Singleton of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Sonia Jones of Atlanta, Georgia, Mr. Curtis Jones and Mr. Charles Jones, both of Warwick, Georgia, Mr. Michael Singleton and his wife, Mrs. Tatera Singleton of Albany, Georgia, his beloved stepchildren, Miss Veronica Mitzi and Miss Monica Mitzi, both of Warwick, Georgia, Mr. Christopher Mitzi of Greenville, South Carolina, Mrs. Danielle Bird and her husband, Mr. Eugene Bird of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Eddie Hicks, Mr. Clovis Hicks, Mr. Albert Smith, Mr. Elvis Smith, Mr. Daniel Hicks, Miss LaShawn Hicks, and Mr. Reginald Smith. 25 beloved grandchildren, 3 of whom he raised, Miss Akela Westbrook of Vienna, Georgia, Miss Kiara Tarbert of Warwick, Georgia, and Mr. Jacari Felton of Oglethorpe, Georgia. 20 beloved grandchildren, his beloved sibling, Mrs. Julia May Hall and her husband, Mr. Johnny Hall, Mrs. Carrie Cooper, Mr. Samuel Cooper and his wife, Mrs. Wanda Faye Cooper, Mr. Jerry Cooper, and Mrs. Bertha Gordon and her husband, Mr. Eroy Gordon, all of Moorhaven, Florida. Mr. Willie Lee Cooper and his wife, Mrs. Raphael Cooper of Tallahassee, Florida, Mrs. Mary Helen Simmons and her husband, Mr. Robert Simmons of Mississippi, and Mr. Willie J. Bryant of Warwick, Georgia, his beloved in-law, Ms. Gwen Mitchell, Mrs. Willie Mae Thomas, Ms. Vicky Thomas, and Mr. Leon Thomas, all of Warwick, Georgia, Mrs. Patricia Thomas and Miss Thelma Battle, both of Cordele, Georgia, his beloved godmother, Mother Willie Mae Walker of Warwick, Georgia, a host of beloved nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Francis Singleton, better known as Mike, of age 76, of 179 Henry Road, Warwick, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Francis Singleton, better known as Mike, age 76, will be held Saturday, February 19 at 11 a.m. at the Mount Olive Baptist Church Cemetery in Warwick, Georgia. The Reverend Ivory Corbin, pastor of the Mount Moriah Baptist Church, will officiate. The public walk-up visitation will be Friday, February 18 from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mrs. Kimberly Shante Grant Sano, age 47, of 515 Southeast 9th Street, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, died Thursday, January 27th at a residence in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Survivors include her loving father, Mr. Curtis Grant of Atlanta, Georgia, her loving and devoted children, Miss Naja Schaefer of Tallahassee, Florida, Mr. Pedro Sano Jr., and Mr. Panzel Sano of Los Angeles, California. 20 beloved siblings, a host of nieces, nephews, many cousins, aunts, uncles, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends, to include a special friend, Mr. Emmanuel Rollins of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. A special stepmother, Mrs. Shirley Trimble of Savannah, Georgia, survived. Mrs. Kimberly Shante Grant Sano, age 47, of 515 Southeast 9th Street, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The funeral service for Mrs. Kimberly Shante Grant Sano, age 47, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Mary Helen Lawson Coley, age 72, of 515 West Pine Street, Vienna, Georgia, died Friday, February 4th at her residence in Vienna, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mrs. Janet Mae Jones, Miss Lucille Lawson, and Mr. Sammy Lawson and his wife, Mrs. Tommy Jean Lawson, all of Vienna, Georgia. 5 beloved grandchildren, a loving sister, Mrs. Willie Mae Anderson of Unadilla, Georgia, a host of other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Mary Helen Lawson Coley, age 72, of 515 West Pine Street, Vienna, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Mary Helen Lawson Coley, age 72, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors, serving Cordele and Vienna, are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. For a special funeral notice outside of our community, United States Army veteran Mr. Alvin Glenn of Columbus, Georgia, formerly of Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. Survivors include locally his beloved sibling, Miss Joanne Glenn, Deacon Charles Edward Glenn Sr. and his wife, Mrs. Deborah Glenn of Cordele, Georgia, his twin brother, the Reverend Calvin Glenn, and his wife, Mrs. Josephine Glenn of Michigan, and beloved uncle, Mr. Judge Glenn, and his wife, Mrs. Tommy Lee Glenn of Cordele, Georgia, survived United States Army veteran Mr. Alvin Glenn of Columbus, Georgia, formerly of Cordele, Georgia. Graveside services with military honors was held Friday, February 11th at Fort Benning Cemetery in Fort Benning, Georgia. The Progressive Funeral Home in Columbus, Georgia was in charge of all arrangements. Friends, that conclude our funeral notices for this morning. And as always, we do remind you concerning our pre-funeral arrangements planning available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, with packages available with a single pay, a 3-year pay, a 5-year pay, and a 10-year pay. So please stop by and talk with us concerning your pre-funeral arrangements needs available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. And also whole life insurance is available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.
time for our announcements. You're invited to worship at the New Poplar Spring Baptist Church today. Everyone has a cordial invitation to worship with them. Their worship service begins at 9:45 a.m. and you may join them via conference call by calling 253-993-3761. Pastor Johnny Dean, pastor, and the members of New Poplar Spring invite you to worship with them. The Spring Hill Baptist Church, Tippettville, Georgia, invites everyone to worship with them for their drive-up and worship service each first and third Sunday beginning at 11 o'clock a.m. Sister Mary Ann Lewis is the secretary. Deacon Edmund Lewis is the chairman of deacons. Reverend Troy Scott Sr. is the pastor. Christ Chapel, Unadilla, Georgia, weekly food pantry is open every Saturday from 9 a.m. until 12 o'clock noon. Ms. Jeanette Taylor, pastor relief trainer, extends each year a cordial invitation to come by Christ Chapel, Unadilla food pantry that's open each Saturday from 9 a.m. until 12 o'clock noon. The Ebenezer Baptist Church service will be held via conference call. The dial-in number is 346-248-7799. The passcode is 228-890-9553. Again, that number is 346-248-7799. The passcode 228-890-9553. Worship service begins at 11 o'clock a.m. Deacon Morris McClendon is the chairman of deacons. Reverend Samuel Stokes is the pastor. You're invited to worship at the Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church today. Conference call schedule is as follows. Sunday morning worship service beginning at 9 o'clock a.m. and you may join them via Facebook Live. Tuesday midday prayer conference at 12 o'clock noon. Thursday prayer meeting and Bible study is held at 6 o'clock p.m. The call-in number for the conference call is 229-329-7611. Again, that number is 229-329-7611, and you may join them for their morning worship service at 9 o'clock a.m. via Facebook Live. Mother Lucille Shea is the church mother. Deacon Arthur L. Parker, chairman of deacons. Dr. K.M. Williams is the pastor. The Emmanuel Missionary Baptist Church invites everyone to pull up and praise each Sunday at 10 o'clock a.m. They are located at 1818 U.S. Highway 41 North, Cordele, Georgia. Reverend Gregory Williams is the pastor. The St. King Baptist Church invites everyone to worship with them each first and third Sunday beginning at 8 o'clock a.m. for an hour power worship service. For Sunday school at 10:15 a.m., Reverend Woody Burnham is the pastor. The Mount Zion First African Baptist Church conference call scheduled for Sunday morning beginning at 10 o'clock a.m. Prayer meeting Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12 o'clock noon. Bible studies held each Wednesday at 5 o'clock p.m. The conference calling number is 339-209-6419. Deacon Joe Wedge is chairman of deacons. Dr. Dan James III is the pastor. The Gethsemane Baptist Church invites everyone to worship with them via Zoom call Sunday mornings beginning at 10:30 a.m. The call-in number is 312-626-6799. The meeting ID number is 810-300-1412. The passcode is 435708. Bible study is held each Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. via conference call 229-234-9066. You may contact any member of the Gethsemane Baptist Church for these numbers. Deacon Johnny Wilson is the chairman of deacons. Mother Mary Butler is the church mother. Reverend Cecil Strauber is the pastor. Everyone has a cordial invitation to worship at the Mount Calvary Baptist Church today. You may join the Facebook Live beginning at 10:30 a.m. Deacon Leon Spears, chairman of deacons. Mother Evelyn Lewis, church mother. Reverend Isaac Owens is the pastor. The New Oak Grove Baptist Church invites everyone to join them on Facebook Live beginning at 10 o'clock a.m. for their morning worship service. Deacon Alonzo Jones is the chairman of deacons. Reverend W.W. Wilson is the pastor. The Davis Chapel CME Church will have worship service each second and fourth Sunday at 10 o'clock a.m. Face masks are required. Brother Ruby Barrett, chairman of stewards. Reverend Arnell Wilburn is the pastor. The MD White's Medical Institute will be conducting both the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccine on Wednesday and Friday from 10 a.m. until 3:30 p.m. Vaccination shots for children ages 5 to 12 are now being offered as well as the booster. Walk-in visits are acceptable. Appointments are not required. Dr. Matthew Whitus, MD, sends this message to each of us as we continue to battle with this COVID-19 virus and other forms that are in our community. The Cordial Christian chapter of the NAACP will meet on Sunday, February 20th, beginning at 4 o'clock p.m. at Blackshear Place. All members or those interested in becoming members are asked to please be in attendance. Dr. Ruby Jackson, Branch Secretary, Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Branch President. We have a very special announcement that we would like to make at this time also. You're invited to drive by, wave, honk, and cheer in the celebration of Mother Lucille Shazer 109th birthday. Mother Lucille Shazer will celebrate her 109th birthday on Friday, February the 18th. There will be a drive-by, wave, honk, and cheer parade will be held on Sunday, February 20th from 12 o'clock noon until 2 o'clock p.m. at 510 4th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. Everyone is invited. Correction. The drive-by, wave, and honk and cheer parade will be held at the Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church, located at 701 North Joe Wright Drive in Cordele, Georgia. The parade will begin at 12 o'clock noon until 2 o'clock p.m. Again, in celebration of Mother Lucille Shazer's 109th birthday, 109 years. We are praising God and thanking God for this time of celebration. She will celebrate her birthday on Friday, February the 18th, and the drive-by, wave, honk, and cheer will be held on Sunday, February the 20th from 12 noon until 2 o'clock p.m. and it will be held at the Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church. The Cordele community and all our surrounding friends are invited to come by as she will be there. Drive by, wave, honk, and cheer in celebration of Mother Lucille Shazer's 109th birthday. That concludes our announcements for today.
And now for dedication. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. In loving memory of Mr. Calvin Lester, who would have celebrated his birthday on February 8th. In loving memory of Mr. Bobby Lee Johnson, who would have celebrated his birthday on February 11th. In loving memory of Mrs. Mary Fagan Thomas, who would have celebrated her birthday on February 11th. In loving memory of Mrs. Ida Rose Oliver, who would have celebrated her birthday February 11th. In loving memory of Mrs. Catherine James, who departed this life on February 11th, 2005. In loving memory of Mrs. Cortez Redding, who would have celebrated her birthday February 12th. In loving memory of Mr. Andre Bivens Haywood, who would have celebrated his birthday February 13th. In loving memory of Mrs. Charlotte Yah, who departed this life February 14, 1999. In loving memory of Mother Willie Child, who departed this life February 14, 1992. In loving memory of Mrs. Ethel Fuller, who would have celebrated her birthday February 15. In loving memory of Mr. Howard Lester Sr., who departed this life February 15, 1976. And in loving memory of Mr. Howard Jones Jr., who departed this life February 15, 1999. In loving memory of Mr. Lester Jones, who departed this life February 15, 1990. In loving memory of Mr. Robert Lee Jones, who departed this life February 16, 2010. And in loving memory of Mrs. Willie Eva Talbot, who would have celebrated her birthday February 17th. Gone, but not forgotten. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Happy birthday to Major Eddie Daniels, who will celebrate his birthday, celebrated Sunday, February 6th. Happy birthday to Mrs. Rebecca Maddox, who celebrated her birthday February 8th. Happy birthday to Mrs. Barbara Clark, who celebrated her birthday February 10th. Happy birthday to Mrs. Gloria Hughes, who celebrated her birthday February 10th. Happy birthday to Miss Chantel Jones, who celebrated her birthday February 11th. Happy birthday to Mrs. Donald Cobb, who celebrated her birthday February 11th. Happy birthday to Minister Gloria Westbrook Mathis, who celebrated her birthday today, February 13. Happy birthday to Miss Michelle Grace, who is celebrating her birthday today, Sunday, February 13. Happy birthday to the Reverend Ivory Corbin, who is celebrating his birthday today, Sunday, February 13. Happy birthday to Mrs. Minnie Redding, who will celebrate her birthday Monday, February 14. Happy birthday to Mrs. Geraldine Pickens, who will celebrate her birthday Friday, February 18th. And special birthday wishes goes out to our own. Happy 109th birthday to Mother Lucille Shazer, who will celebrate her birthday Friday, February 18th. To be the Lord's will, she'll be in church service today with her deaconesses there. It is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Mr. Vernon David Conaway, age 54, Macon, Georgia, died Sunday, February 6 at Atron Health in Navison in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Vernon David Conaway, age 54, will be held Friday, February 18th at 12 noon on the grounds of New Mercy, New Beginnings, New Victory Ministries in Macon, Georgia. Bishop Willie Hunter, his father-in-law, will officiate. Mr. Francis Singleton, better known as Mike, age 76, 179 Henry Road, Warwick, Georgia, died Monday, February 7th at the Phoebe Putt Memorial Hospital, North Campus in Albany, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Francis Singleton, better known as Mike, age 76, will be held Saturday, February 19 at 11 a.m. at the Mount Olive Baptist Church Cemetery in Warwick, Georgia. The Reverend Ivory Corbin, pastor of the Mount Moriah Baptist Church, will officiate. Mrs. Kimberly Shante Grant Sano, age 47, of 515 Southeast 9th Street, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, died Thursday, January 27th at her residence in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The funeral service for Mrs. Kimberly Shante Grant Sano, age 47, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangement. Mrs. Mary Helen Lawson Coley, age 72, of 515 West Pine Street, Vienna, Georgia, died Friday, February 4th at her residence. The funeral service for Mrs. Mary Helen Lawson Coley, age 72, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors, serving Cordele and Vienna, are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Our selection this morning is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones were laid to rest during the past week. The family of Miss Vivian Diane Hunt of Cordele, Georgia. The family of United States Navy veteran Mr. Romana Roberson of Decatur, Georgia and Cordele, Georgia. The family of Deacon Arthur Lee Robinson Sr. of DeSoto, Georgia. The family of Mr. Charles Manuel Morgan Jr. of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. William Clark of Araby, Georgia. The family of Deacon Charlie B. Doster of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Ezel Kendrick Jr. of Cordele, Georgia. This selection is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones will be laid to rest during this week. The family of Mr. Vernon David Conaway of Macon, Georgia. The family, Mr. Francis Singleton, better known as Mike of Warwick, Georgia. The family, Mrs. Kimberly Shante Grant-Sano of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The family of Mrs. Mary Helen Lawson Coley of Vienna, Georgia. This election is dedicated to all of the sick and shut-in, to all patients in the local and surrounding hospitals, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers, to our beloved ministers and their devoted family members, to all retired educators, to our men and women serving in our armed forces, both stateside and abroad, to all veterans, and to everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning. It's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. Our program goes out in memory of our past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams, to my wife, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, to my son, Jai Wilkerson Parker. This election goes out to my mother-in-law, Mrs. Billy Ann Hall, and family, to my brothers, retired Chief Master Sergeant Norman F. Dexter, and to his wife, Dr. Gwendolyn Maxine Dexter, and our grandson, Noble. This election goes out to my sisters, Miss Maddie Mae Johnson, better known as Sister Girl, and Mrs. Patsy Jackson, her husband, Mr. Jim Jackson of Cordele, Georgia. This election goes out to my nephew, Deacon Kenneth Smith, program chairman of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church, our pastor, Dr. K.M. Williams, his wife, Sister Kathy Williams, and to all of the deacons and deaconesses of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church who would be honored today in the annual celebration of the Deacons and Deaconess anniversary. Deacon Tommy Ford, Chairman, the Board of Deaconess Cassandra Jones Jackson, Deaconess President of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church, and Mother Lucille Shazer, Church Mother, and to all deacons and deaconesses of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church, if you're honored for such special work that you render to the church and to the service of our Lord and Savior. And again, we like to say happy Valentine's Day to each and every lovely lady throughout our viewing area. And remind the gentlemen, don't forget tomorrow, February 14th, is Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day to each and every one. And don't forget about Mother Lucille Shazer celebrating her 109th birthday on February the 18th. Mother Lucille Shazer, Church Mother of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church. This program goes out to her and to Mr. Cleveland R. Lemon, oldest staff member of the Greater Morris of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mr. Cleveland R. Lemon, oldest staff member of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. God bless you. And our program goes out to Miss Easter May Sanders and the entire family, Mr. George and Mrs. Annette Felton and family. God bless you.
Yes, I'm going to walk. Oh, that will keep my way. Oh, child.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We hope you've enjoyed our program. Tune in again on next Sunday morning.
Well,
In your time of need, contact the competent, capable, and dependable staff at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.
some of these days.